Don't you dare die on me, not in front of her. The words tore from Jasmine Williams's throat as she pressed both hands against the gunshot wound in Dante Salvatore's chest. Blood, hot, arterial, impossibly red, pulsed between her fingers, soaking into the white apron of her waitress uniform, staining the cracked asphalt beneath her knees. His eyes, gray-green, sharp even through the haze of shock, locked onto hers with predatory focus. Not gratitude. Not fear. Assessment. Even bleeding out in the rain-slicked alley behind Ruby's diner, he was calculating whether she was a threat or a tool. Behind them, pressed against the dumpster, a small girl with dark curls and her father's exact eyes watched in frozen silence, her hands clutching a stuffed rabbit soaked with rain and her father's blood. Jazz was a 26-year-old black waitress. Her world was the weight of heavy trays, the ache in her lower back, the eviction notice on her fridge, and the 8-year-old niece, Imani. She was one missed paycheck away from losing to CPS. Invisibility was her survival skill. The man dying under her hands was a sovereign nation. He controlled ports, unions, city councils. His watch was worth more than her existence. Yet in this alley they were equals. Two guardians brought to their knees. Him by a bullet meant for his child. Her by a reflex she didn't know she still had. Headlights swept the alley mouth. Engine idling. Hunting. Dante's blood-slick hand gripped her wrist. My men 2 minutes. His, will be here in 1. Take her. Go. Jazz looked at Lucia's terror-glazed eyes. She thought of Imani. Of being a child in the crossfire of a world you didn't understand. The split-second decision. She didn't run. She did something shocking. She yanked off her stained white apron. Wrapped it around Lucia's trembling shoulders, hiding the expensive velvet. She smeared a streak of dirt from the ground onto the girl's pale cheek. With swift, sure motions she unraveled Lucia's perfect braids, letting the curls spring wild. In 10 seconds, the Mafia princess vanished. Replaced by a tired waitress's kid sister, hanging around after shift. Jazz pulled the girl into the shadow of the dumpster, just as a man in a leather jacket stepped into the alley. You see a man and a little girl? Jazz met his gaze. Her own face a mask of exhausted indifference. Just taking out the trash, boss. You see any help around here? The man scanned the alley, saw a dying man in a pool of blood, a waitress with a grubby kid. His brain categorized and dismissed. Invisible. He moved on. Jazz had just hidden the most valuable asset in the city's underworld, in plain sight. And Dante Salvatore, bleeding out on the concrete, witnessed it all. He saw the genius of it. The genuine goodness without agenda. The thing he thought was extinct in his world. His men arrived like a SWAT team in suits. They moved Dante with terrifying efficiency. The leader, Marco, with a scar down his face, looked at Jazz holding the disguised Lucia. The boss. What happened? Jazz's voice was flat, the truth hidden in a different lie. Drive by. Wrong place, wrong time. I found him. The kid was hiding in the dumpster. She sold the story with the weary conviction of someone who'd seen too much urban violence to be surprised. She didn't go home. She was ushered into a black SUV, Lucia glued to her side. They didn't go to a mansion. They went to her studio apartment in the Bronx. The logic was military genius. Rossi's men would tear the city apart looking for a hidden fortress, a penthouse, a safe house. They would never look in a 400-square-foot studio in a building slated for demolition. Smelling of fried food and despair. Dante, pale and sutured on her couch, laid it out. For 72 hours, you are her bunker. Your anonymity is her armor. Your ordinary life is the perfect camouflage. Jazz looked at Lucia, quietly drawing at her tiny kitchen table, and at Imani, asleep in the loft bed. 2 children under her roof. One the target of a mob war. The other the target of a broken system. The walls of her world, already so thin, were now the front line. Dante watched her move through the cramped space, making peanut butter sandwiches, finding extra blankets, speaking to both girls in the same gentle, firm tone. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the resilience in her spine. Your landlord, he stated. He files eviction in 3 days. The familiar dread coiled in her gut. How do you? I know everything that matters. He picked up his shattered phone. A single call. The building at 424 Grove. Acquire it. Nullify all pending actions. He listened. No. The current resident, Jasmine Williams, remains. At zero rent. In perpetuity. He hung up. Jas stood frozen, a jar of jelly in her hand. Her rent, her constant grinding terror erased. Just like that. That's the down payment, he said, his voice low. The price of your mercy. My debt. And the rest of the price? She whispered. Your eyes. Your ears. At Ruby's. Rossi's men will come. They will ask questions. You will tell me what they ask, how they ask it. He finally showed the hidden wound. My wife, Isabella, was killed protecting a stranger. Goodness in my world is a fatal flaw. You walked onto my battlefield armed with it. That makes you either the most dangerous person I know, or the only one I can trust. He was offering a deal with the devil, protection for her and Imani, in exchange for becoming his intelligence asset in the world he was too visible to see. The little girl, Lucia, walked over and silently took Jas's hand. The catalyst. The reason. Jas looked from the child's trusting eyes to the father's guarded ones. She nodded. Rossi's men came to Ruby's, just as Dante predicted. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like city workers, off-duty cops, tired businessmen. They sat in her section. They made small talk. Jas served them with the perfect, polished invisibility of a veteran waitress. She was a ghost, and they looked right through her. But she saw everything. The nervous tap of a finger indicating a wired payment. The specific brand of cigarette that matched but's found near a burned-out warehouse. The way one man's eyes constantly scanned the room not for threats, but for a little girl with gray-green eyes. She reported it all via burner phone. Dante's war machine pivoted on her dime. A shipment intercepted here. A bribed official exposed there. She was dismantling an empire with coffee refills and quiet observation. Her power was no longer endurance. It was attention. The weapon of the invisible. Rossi, frustrated, changed tactics. He didn't look for the girl. He looked for the weakness. Jas was walking Imani home from school when she saw the car, the same one from the alley, idling across from her building. A man watched them, his gaze lingering on Imani. A cold terror, deeper than any she'd felt for herself, seized her. She'd broken the first rule. She'd made her family a target. That night, in her apartment, Dante saw the fear she couldn't hide. He's escalating. He can't find Lucia, so he'll pressure you through what you love. You said we were safe here, she said, her voice cracking with fury and fear. I was wrong, he admitted. A shocking thing for a man like him to say. The sanctuary is compromised. We move. All of us. Where? Another apartment? He'll find it. No, Dante's eyes gleamed with a new, dangerous plan. We don't hide. We flaunt. The next day, Jas walked into Ruby's diner for her shift. With her, holding her hand, was Lucia. Not disguised as a poor kid, but dressed beautifully. A bright, noticeable dress. She sat Lucia at the counter with a coloring book and a milkshake, in full view of the entire diner. Jas leaned over the counter, speaking softly to the little girl for the benefit of a listening ear. You stay right here with Auntie Jas, okay, sweetie? Your dad's running late from the auto shop. She had just publicly rebranded the Mafia heir. She wasn't a hidden princess. She was Jas's niece from her sister's side, visiting for the day. The most brazen, shocking lie of all, told in the open. Rossi's watcher from his booth stared. His certainty wavered. Could this really be Salvatore's daughter? Sitting in a diner? It was too absurd to be a trick. He texted his boss. Possible sighting. Seems wrong. Too public. The trap was set. Dante's men, watching the watcher, now had a direct line to Rossi's command. The confrontation didn't happen in a warehouse. It happened in Dante's new, legitimate corporate office. Rossi, desperate and furious, forced his way in, convinced Dante had grown soft sentimental. He found Dante behind a CEO's desk, Jas standing at his side, not as a servant, but as a strategist. Lucia was safe in a fortified playroom downstairs. You bring your waitress to a war council? Rossi sneered. She ended the war. Dante said calmly. While you were looking for a hidden child, she showed you one in a diner. While you were bribing port officials, She identified the one official you owned who was ready to flip. You didn't lose to my guns, Enzo. You lost to her attention. Dante slid a file across the desk. It was Rossi's entire operation unraveled. The source of the intelligence. Mundane details from a diner, a schoolyard, a housing office. Rossi looked at Jazz, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as background noise, but as the architect of his ruin. The invisible woman who had become the most powerful person in the room. Mercy, Jazz said, her voice clear in the silence. You thought it was his weakness. It was your blind spot. 6 months later, Jazz no longer wore a polyester uniform. She wore a blazer and sat behind a desk at the Dante Salvatore Foundation, a legal aid and housing nonprofit. Her first client was always the tenant facing eviction. Her office wall held 2 framed items. Her old name tag, and a child's drawing of 3 figures holding hands. Dante's empire was now largely legitimate. Construction, green energy, union rep. The violence was a receding shadow. On Sundays he and Lucia came for dinner. To Imani he was just Mr. Dante, her aunt's serious friend who always asked about her science grade. To Lucia, Jazz was Auntie Jazz, her safe harbor. The two of them stood one evening, watching the girls play in the Foundation's community garden. You asked for nothing, Dante said, not looking at her. That first night. You only acted. That was the shock. I asked for her safety, Jazz corrected softly. And in doing so, I found my own. He nodded. The frozen man had thawed. The invisible woman had become powerful. Not through taking, but through protecting. The most dangerous thing in their world had not been violence. It had been a waitress with nothing to lose, choosing mercy. And in that choice, she forged a new world. One where a mafia boss learned to build shelters instead of fortresses. And a woman learned her greatest strength was the heart she'd been told to hide. Jazz Williams learned that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a man with a gun. It's a woman with nothing to lose who chooses compassion anyway. And Dante Salvatore learned that the strongest walls aren't made of stone and fear. They're built on the foundation of a single, unexpected act of grace. In the end, the waitress didn't just save the mafia boss's daughter. She saved his soul. And in return, he gave her the one thing she'd never had, real, unshakable power.